The house was completely dark, and the oil lamp had gone out, and the fire on the hearth had been extinguished. Inside that small farmhouse in northern Japan, terrified voices were echoing through the darkness as children cried out and furniture crashed to the floor. Somewhere in that room, something enormous was moving, and the people trapped inside could not see it, but they could hear it. Heavy footsteps crossed the wooden floor, and the sound of wood splintering filled the darkness, and underneath all of it was the slow, heavy sound of something breathing where nothing should have been breathing. Outside, snow covered the forests of Hokkaido, and inside, a giant brown bear had entered the house, and by the time help arrived, several people would already be dead. This was not a legend, and it was not folklore, but a real event that happened in the winter of 1915. And over 6 days, a single bear attacked a remote settlement and killed 7 people and injured 3 more. The Sankebetsu brown bear incident is still considered the deadliest animal attack in Japanese history, and what makes it so deeply unsettling is that it did not begin with violence, but with a bear stealing corn. Weeks before any of this happened, the settlers of a small pioneer community called Sankebetsu had noticed an unusually large brown bear wandering near their homes, and at first nobody was alarmed, because encounters with wildlife were just a normal part of life in that newly established settlement. One morning in mid-November, the animal approached the Aikta family home, and their horse got spooked and made enough noise to wake the household, but the bear showed no interest in people and simply took some harvested corn and disappeared back into the trees. The villagers wrote it off as a nuisance, and nothing more in life continued as normal until the bear returned and then returned again, and hunters were called, but the animal always vanished before anything could be done. On the 30th of November, hunters finally opened fire and failed to kill it, and the following morning they followed its tracks into the wilderness and found blood in the snow, which led them to believe the bear was wounded and would probably die out there or move far enough away to never bother anyone again. They believed the danger had passed, and they went home, and the settlement went back to normal, and families worked and children played, and no one knew that one of the worst wildlife disasters in Japanese history was only days away. Then came December 9th, and at around 10:30 in the morning, the bear appeared at the home of the Oda family, where a farmer's wife named Abe Mayu and a baby she had been caring for were inside alone. The attack was sudden and total, and the baby suffered a severe bite to the head and was killed, and Mayu grabbed firewood and threw it at the animal and tried to run, but the bear overtook her and knocked her to the ground and dragged her into the forest. When the villagers arrived at the scene, they described it as looking like a slaughterhouse with blood covering the floor, and the entire settlement was thrown into panic, and weapons were collected, and plans were made to find the bear and bring Mayu home. At dawn the next morning, a search party of around 30 men entered the forest and had not gone far when they found the bear still in the area watching them from among the trees, and when they fired, most shots missed, and only a single bullet struck the animal. 30 armed men could not bring it down, and after it retreated deeper into the forest, the search continued, and eventually they found dried blood beneath a tree and began digging into the snow. What they uncovered changed everything about how they understood what they were dealing with, because the body had been hidden beneath the snow, and the bear had not wandered off or abandoned its victim, but had carefully concealed her as if it intended to return. For the villagers, that realization was more frightening than the attack itself, because this animal was doing something deliberate, and if it had buried her to come back later, then it would almost certainly return to the settlement, and they were right about that. On the evening of December 10th, with the villagers armed and waiting, the bear emerged from the darkness around 8 o'clock, and despite everything they had prepared, panic broke out immediately, and the bear vanished before anyone could respond. Guards stationed nearby rushed toward the scene, but the bear was already gone, and when they followed what they believed was its trail downstream, they made a catastrophic mistake, because the bear had never gone that way and had turned back toward the settlement instead. The Miyauk farmhouse had become a gathering point for women and children from across the settlement, and most of the guards were now gone, and that evening, a woman named Ye was inside preparing food with her young son strapped to her back when the bear smashed through a window and forced its way inside. The cooking pot overturned and the fire went out and the lamp was extinguished, and in seconds the room was in total darkness, with people screaming and children crying and nobody able to see what was happening. Yeo tried to escape, but one of her children grabbed her legs in panic, and she fell, and the bear reached her and attacked, and the child on her back was bit. A man named Odo was the only guard who had stayed inside, and when he ran for the door, the bear turned and chased him instead, and that decision may have saved Yeo's life, because while the animal pursued Odo, she managed to get outside with some of the children. Odo tried to hide, but it did not work, and the bear found him and clawed him across the back, and then moved through that dark room, attacking more people, and some were killed, and others were injured badly enough that they could not move. When the guards finally returned, they found Yeo barely able to stand and rushed to the farmhouse where sounds were still coming from inside. And when a massive shape appeared at the front doorway, rifles came up, but guards were blocking each other and one rifle misfired, and in the confusion the bear pushed through them and disappeared into the darkness for the second time. For the second time, the villagers had failed to stop it, and the nightmare was far from over because somewhere beyond the reach of their torchlight, the bear was still alive and still watching. News of the attack spread beyond the village and authorities arrived, and more weapons came, and dozens of armed men began searching the surrounding land, but the bear seemed to vanish whenever anyone got close. Then one name kept coming up in conversations, and that was Yamamoto Haikichi, who was said to have more experience with bears than almost anyone in the region, and who believed he recognized this particular animal. He called it Kesagake after the distinctive white marking that ran diagonally across its body. In years before the Senkebetsu attacks, that same bear had reportedly been connected to deadly attacks elsewhere, which meant the villagers were facing an animal that had already learned what it meant to hunt a human being. But when people came to ask for Yamamoto's help, he refused because he had pawned his rifle for money, and without it, there was nothing he could offer. Eventually, Yamamoto was brought into the effort, and a plan was put forward to use one of the bear's victims as bait, and the suggestion horrified the families of the dead, but fear had reached a level where people were willing to consider almost anything. That night, the hunters waited for hours, and then the bear appeared and approached carefully and stopped and observed the house, and the hunters held their breath with fingers on triggers, and then the bear simply turned around and walked back into the forest, and the trap had completely failed. The following morning, the bear had returned overnight and broken into homes and destroyed food supplies that families needed to survive the winter, and at least 8 houses had been damaged by an animal that was showing no fear of people at all. Then, during the night of December 13th, a guard spotted a shape on the far bank of a river in the darkness, and shots were fired, and the shape disappeared. And when investigators crossed the river the following morning, they found tracks and fresh blood in the snow. The bear had been wounded, and for the first time since the attacks began, there was a real trail to follow, but a major snowstorm was moving toward the area, and if the snow covered the ground, the tracks would be gone forever. Yamamoto took only one man with him, a guide named Aikta Kamejiro, and the two of them entered the forest and followed the blood trail deeper into the trees, where every step carried real risk, because a wounded animal cornered is more dangerous than one that is not. And then Yamamoto saw it resting near a Japanese oak tree, and not charging and not running, but completely still, and after 6 days of attacks and failed hunts, and missed shots and blood and fear, the bear was right there in front of him. He closed the distance carefully, and at 20 meters he raised the rifle and fired, and the first shot struck the bear in the heart, and before it could recover, he fired again, and the second shot hit the head, and the bear collapsed in the snow and did not get up. When the animal was examined, it weighed around 340 kilograms and stood approximately 2.7 meters tall, with a head that was unusually large compared to its body, and a necropsy confirmed what everyone had feared, because inside the bear's stomach, investigators found remains belonging to its victims. The attacks had not been random, and this animal had been deliberately targeting people, and the final count was 7 dead and 3 injured, and entire families had been destroyed. In the months that followed, people began abandoning the settlement piece by piece, until the community that settlers had worked so hard to build in that remote corner of Hokkaido became almost a ghost town. Yeo survived and recovered, but her son Yumikichi, who had been on her back when the bear entered that dark room, died less than 3 years later from complications connected to his wounds, and Odo recovered and returned to work, and the following spring fell into a river and drowned. As years passed, stories about Kesagake spread across Japan, and some people began describing the animal not as a bear, but as a yokai, or a spirit, or a force of nature beyond natural explanation. A man named Akawa Haragoshi, who had been only 6 years old during the attacks, swore an oath to kill 10 bears for every person Kesagake had taken. And by the age of 62, he had killed 102 bears, and then he stopped and built a memorial near the site so that the people who died there would not be forgotten. That memorial still stands today near the Senkebetsu River, and each year people travel to that small clearing in the forest and stand there and remember what happened in the winter of 1915. More than a century has passed, and the forests have changed, and the settlement is long gone, but the story refuses to disappear. 7 people killed and 3 injured in 6 days of terror and 1 bear, and the Senkebetsu brown bear incident is still considered the deadliest animal attack in Japanese history, and a reminder of how quickly the boundary between humans and the wild can disappear.